So it goes without saying that Cheltenham is absolutely huge. And if we look at Cheltenham, it's obviously a key feature meeting as we move through the year. And in general, it's one of the biggest meetings that you'll see over the entire year in the horse racing industry. So what are my 5 top tips for trading Cheltenham? Number 5, if you look at the volume at Cheltenham, it's massive. Over 10 years, the turnover pre-off on the Cheltenham markets has been over £1 billion. And if we look at that on an individual basis, in that sample set, we're looking at the biggest race being £11.1 million and the smallest race being £1.7 million. So if you look at pre-off markets, these are markets that will be measured in millions of pounds, not the hundreds of thousands that you see on a traditional race day. So yeah, absolutely massive. Cheltenham is big, the markets are very liquid, and there's enormous amounts of money in them. Number 4. If you look at the in-play markets, they behave a little bit differently at Cheltenham to an ordinary weekday market. So in a typical race market, we would expect the amount of in-play betting to be about 20% of the total turnover of that race from when it opened to when the race finishes. However, if we look at Cheltenham, we tend to find that that slips a bit. It drops by about a quarter to about 15%. So when you're looking at the in-play markets at Cheltenham, they behave a little bit differently. And what you tend to find is they work in a slightly narrower range. So if you're dobbing, if you're doing a back to lay or a lay to back or something like that, the sort of price that you're asking for probably won't be hit as frequently as you do see in traditional, ordinary day-to-day racing markets. So if you're going to dob, you'll probably find that it may not get hit, your exit trade, and therefore you need to tighten it up a bit. But also you'll notice when you look at the in-play markets, they tend to be a little bit more decisive. So when a winner becomes apparent, the money really begins to go for it, and you probably won't see as much variability that you do in the ordinary race day market. So yeah, in-play markets trade a little bit differently at Cheltenham. Number 3, if you look at the starting price, the Betfair starting price on the exchange, you'll tend to find that over the last sort of 5 to 10 years, that has gradually been declining and getting to smaller and smaller levels. So basically the market's getting more and more efficient. There's less and less money being lost to the other side of the book over time. And in fact, if you look at last year at Cheltenham, the SP on average resolved at 100.16%. So there's a tiny, tiny amount of margin that you're losing to the other side of the book. That brings into play outright betting strategies because the theoretical loss that you make is quite small. And as a consequence, you can actually deploy a number of different strategies. An outright backing strategy is pretty good. You're not going to get a bad price. The market's so competitive that you're going to end up getting a price that more or less reflects the true value. So if you can do a little bit better than that, you will make money. But however, in some of the more competitive fields, it can be difficult to pick a winner. But why not use a strategy like Dutching to cover a range of winners? Because you'll be able to benefit from being able to pick more than one runner, but you'll also be able to benefit from being able to get a price that's so competitive that the theoretical loss to the other side of the book is absolutely minimal. Number 2. If you look at pre-off racing at Cheltenham, you tend to find the average traded range is much narrower than you'd expect on an average day. So typically we're looking at about a third less volatile than an average standard horse racing meeting that you would expect to see on a day-to-day basis. Now the impact of that is that when you're actively trading a market at Cheltenham, you wouldn't expect to get a sort of 20 or 30 tick move. It's unlikely that that would happen. You're going to have to set your sights a lot lower. So the problem is if you're using the same stake that you use on a day-to-day basis at a meeting where that range is much lower and your potential profit is much lower, then you're going to earn much less money. So the response to that is typically to raise stakes, which of course, as we've mentioned already, should be possible at Cheltenham. You'll tend to find that when the market inherits a direction, it tends to move in that direction firmly, doesn't tend to come back, but also you tend to find that average range is lower, and therefore you need to use larger stakes to get more money out of the market, and that's typically what I do at Cheltenham. I tend to push as much money as I can through those Cheltenham markets. And the number 1 tip is go and visit the BetAngel Academy. And that is because we have put on the BetAngel Academy over nearly 4.5 hours worth of videos that we have done at previous Cheltenham meetings. We go into all of the topics that I've discussed in this short video in much more depth. You can see my progression through a variety of Cheltenham meetings. You can see some videos on what the Cheltenham markets look like and more in-depth data. So yeah, my number 1 tip is go and check out the BetAngel Academy because there are nearly 4.5 hours worth of videos there for you to view all about Cheltenham. So yeah, with that, I hope you have a great Cheltenham Festival.